The morning sun was bright and warm, but peace felt cold inside her heart. She sat on the old wooden chair in the kitchen, looking down at the terrible shoes on her feet. They were so big and ugly. The leather was cracked and worn out. They made loud noises when she walked. These were not her shoes. These were old shoes that Susan, her stepmother, had given her to wear to church. "Hurry up, Peace," Susan shouted from the bedroom. "I don't want to be late because of you." Peace stood up slowly. The shoes were too big for her small feet. They made her walk funny, like a duck. She looked at herself in the small broken mirror by the door. Her dress was old and had holes in it. Her hair was messy and dirty. She had tried to comb it with her fingers, but it still looked bad. In the other room, Susan was getting ready. She looked like a beautiful model. Her hair was perfect. Her dress was new and expensive. Her shoes were shiny and pretty. She put on red lipstick and looked at herself in the big mirror. She smiled at how beautiful she looked. "I'm ready," Peace said quietly. Susan came out and looked at Peace. She started laughing. "Look at you. You look so funny in those big shoes." She laughed more. "But this is what you deserve. Good girls get good things. Bad girls get old things." Peace felt her eyes fill with tears, but she did not cry. She had learned not to cry in front of Susan. It only made things worse. "I will take my car to church," Susan said. "You will walk. The exercise will be good for you. And maybe those big shoes will teach you to be grateful for what you have." Peace's heart felt heavy. The church was far away. It would take her 30 minutes to walk there in these terrible shoes, but she loved going to church. It was the only place where she felt happy. She loved singing the songs. She loved hearing Pastor Peter talk about God's love. She loved holding her old Bible, even though it was torn and some pages were missing. "Yes, Susan," Peace said softly. Susan got into her shiny car, the same car that used to belong to Peace's father. She drove away fast, leaving Peace standing alone in front of the house. Peace began to walk. The shoes made loud sounds on the road. Every step was noisy. People turned to look at her. Some children started following her. "Look at her shoes," said a boy named David. He was about her age. "They are so big and ugly." "She looks like a clown," said a girl named Jennifer. She pointed at Peace and laughed. More children came. They walked behind Peace, making fun of her shoes. "Clap, clap, clap," they said, copying the sound her shoes made. "Look at the clown girl." Peace walked faster, but the shoes were too big. She almost fell down. The children laughed harder. "Stop it," Peace said, but her voice was small and quiet. "Why are you wearing those ugly shoes?" asked David. "Did you steal them from a giant?" "Maybe she has big feet like a monster," said Jennifer. Peace felt tears coming to her eyes. She held her torn Bible close to her chest. The children kept following her and making fun of her. She wanted to run, but the shoes made it hard to walk fast. Finally, she reached the church. The children ran away to find their parents. Peace stood outside the church door, breathing hard. She could hear the people inside singing. She loved that sound. But she was afraid to go in. Everyone would hear her shoes making noise. She looked down at her feet. The shoes were dirty now from the long walk. Her dress had more dirt on it. Her hair was messy from walking fast. She felt so ugly and ashamed. But she loved God. She loved church. She wanted to go in. Peace opened the door slowly. The church was full of people. They were singing a beautiful song. Pastor Peter was at the front, leading the singing. He was a kind man with a gentle face. Peace tried to walk quietly to the back of the church, but the shoes made noise with every step. People turned to look at her. Some children started giggling. "Shh," their mother said. But they were looking at Peace too. Peace found a seat in the back. She sat down quickly and put her feet under the chair. She tried to hide the ugly shoes. She opened her torn Bible and pretended to read, but she could feel people staring at her. In the front row, Susan sat with other women. She looked beautiful and perfect. She was talking and laughing with them. She did not look at Peace. She acted like she did not know her. Pastor Peter finished the song and asked everyone to sit down. He began to speak about God's love for all people. God loves every person. he said. He loves the rich and the poor. He loves the beautiful and the plain. He loves everyone the same. Peace listened to every word. These words made her feel better. Maybe God loved her too, even with her ugly shoes and messy hair. But then something happened. A woman named Mrs. Patricia was walking to the bathroom. She was not watching where she was going. She stepped on Peace's big shoe. Peace tried to move her foot, but the shoe was stuck. Mrs. Patricia pulled her foot away and Peace's shoe came off. The shoe flew across the church floor. It made a loud noise. Everyone turned to look. The shoe was so big and ugly, lying there in the middle of the church. All the children started laughing. Even some adults were trying not to smile. Peace felt her face turn red. She was so ashamed. She wanted to hide under the chair. She wanted to run away, but she could not leave without her shoe. Pastor Peter stopped talking. He looked at the shoe, then at Peace. He saw her red face and her tears. He saw how ashamed she was. "My child," he said in a loud voice, "please come to the front of the church." Everyone became quiet. Peace felt her heart beating fast. Why was Pastor Peter calling her? She had done nothing wrong. "Come, child," Pastor Peter said again. His voice was kind but firm. Peace stood up slowly. She was wearing only one shoe. Her other foot was bare. She walked to the front of the church. Every step was hard. Everyone was looking at her. When she reached the front, Pastor Peter looked at her carefully. He saw her torn dress and messy hair. He saw the big ugly shoe on one foot and the bare foot. He saw her old torn Bible in her hands. But most of all, he saw the sadness in her eyes. He saw how thin she was. He saw small bruises on her arms. He saw a girl who was hurting. "Tell me, child," Pastor Peter said gently. "What is your name?" "Peace," she whispered. "And who takes care of you, Peace?" Peace looked back at Susan. Susan was watching with angry eyes. She was shaking her head slightly, warning Peace not to say anything bad about her. My stepmother," Peace said quietly. "And where is your stepmother now?" Peace pointed to Susan. Susan stood up and smiled. She looked beautiful and perfect.
"Hello, Pastor Peter,"
she said sweetly.
"I am Susan. I take good care of Peace. She is just difficult sometimes."
Pastor Peter looked at Susan, then back at Peace. He knelt down so he was at Peace's eye level. "Peace," he said softly. "Tell me about these shoes." Peace looked down at her feet. Tears started falling from her eyes. They are too big for me," she whispered. "Who gave them to you?" "Susan did," she said. "She said this is what I deserve." Pastor Peter felt anger growing in his heart. He stood up and looked at Susan. "Mrs. Susan," he said, "can you explain why this child is wearing shoes that do not fit her?" Susan's smile became bigger. "Oh, Pastor Peter, you know how children are. Peace is very careless. She ruined her good shoes, so I gave her these old ones to teach her to be more careful." Some people in the church nodded. They thought Susan was being a good mother. But Pastor Peter was not fooled. He had been a pastor for many years. He knew when someone was lying. He looked at Peace again. She was crying and holding her torn Bible. "Peace," he said, "look at me." Peace looked up at him with her sad, wet eyes. "Do you have other shoes at home?" Peace shook her head. "No, Pastor Peter. These are my only shoes." "And do you have other clothes?" "Only a few," Peace whispered. "Old ones." Pastor Peter felt his heart breaking. He looked at Susan again. She was still smiling, but her eyes were cold and mean. "Mrs. Susan," Pastor Peter said, "I think we need to talk after church." Susan's smile disappeared for a moment. "Of course, Pastor Peter, but I assure you, I take very good care of Peace. She is just ungrateful sometimes." Peace felt more tears coming. She wanted to tell Pastor Peter the truth about how Susan treated her. She wanted to tell him about the beatings and the hunger and the cruel words, but she was afraid. Susan would hurt her more if she told. Pastor Peter put his hand gently on Peace's shoulder. "Don't worry, child," he said softly. "Everything will be okay." He looked out at the church full of people. They were all watching and waiting. He knew he had to do something. This little girl was in trouble, and God had put her in his path to help. "My friends," Pastor Peter said to the church, Sometimes God shows us things that need our attention. Today, God has shown me that this little girl needs our help. Susan stood up quickly. Pastor Peter, I don't think. Sit down, Mrs. Susan, Pastor Peter said firmly. I am not finished. Susan sat down, but her face was red with anger. Pastor Peter continued, This child is asking for nothing but love and care. Look at her. Really look at her. Does she look like a child who is being well cared for? People in the church started looking at Peace more carefully. They saw her thin body and torn clothes. They saw her sad eyes and bare foot. They began to understand that something was wrong. Peace, Pastor Peter said. You don't have to be afraid anymore. God sees everything. And God has people who want to help you. Peace looked up at him with hope in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe things could get better. But Susan was getting angrier. She knew that Pastor Peter was trying to take Peace away from her, and she would not let that happen easily. The church was very quiet. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Peace stood there in her one big, ugly shoe, holding her torn Bible, hoping that someone would finally help her. Pastor Peter looked at her and made a decision that would change everything. But 2 years ago, Peace's life was not like this. 2 years ago, she had a mother and father who loved her. 2 years ago, she went to school and had friends. 2 years ago, she was happy. But everything changed when her parents died. Now, Peace woke up every morning before the sun came up. She had to wake up early because Susan gave her so much work to do. Susan never helped with anything. She said that was Peace's job now. Peace, get up, Susan would shout from her bedroom. The house will not clean itself. Peace would open her tired eyes and get up from her small bed. Her bed was just a thin mattress on the floor, in the small room behind the kitchen. It was not a real bedroom. It was more like a storage room. But this was where Susan made her sleep. Susan slept in the big, beautiful bedroom that used to belong to Peace's parents. She slept in their big, soft bed. She used their expensive blankets and pillows. She acted like everything in the house belonged to her. Every morning, Peace had to sweep the whole house. The house was big, with many rooms. It took her a long time to sweep everywhere. After sweeping, she had to mop all the floors. Then she had to dust all the furniture. You missed a spot, Susan would say, pointing at a tiny piece of dust. Do it again. Peace would do it again, even though she was tired. After cleaning the house, Peace had to wash all the clothes. She had to wash them by hand because Susan said the washing machine was too expensive to use. Peace's hands became red and sore from washing clothes in the cold water. Wash them harder, Susan would yell. They are still dirty. Peace would wash them harder, even though her hands hurt. After washing clothes, Peace had to hang them outside to dry. Then she had to go to the tap outside the house to get water. The tap was far away, and the water buckets were heavy. Peace had to make many trips to fill all the water containers in the house. Sometimes, other people at the tap would look at Peace and feel sorry for her. That poor girl, they would whisper. She looks so thin and tired. But they did not know how to help her, and Peace was too afraid to ask for help. When Peace came back from getting water, Susan would have more work for her. Clean the bathroom, wash the dishes, cook the food, iron the clothes. Susan always had something for Peace to do. Peace never went to school anymore. Susan had taken her out of school right after her parents died. School is expensive, Susan had said. And you need to learn how to work, not how to read books. Peace missed school so much. She missed her friends and her teachers. She missed learning new things. But Susan said she was too stupid for school anyway. Your mother was stupid and your father was stupid, Susan would say. That is why they died in that car accident. Stupid people do stupid things. These words hurt Peace more than any beating. She loved her parents so much. She missed them every day. When Susan said bad things about them, Peace felt like someone was stabbing her heart. Don't say that about my parents, Peace said one day when she could not take it anymore. Susan's face became very angry. She walked over to Peace and slapped her hard across the face. Don't you dare talk back to me, she shouted. I am your mother now. You will respect me. You are not my mother, Peace cried. My mother was kind and gentle. She never hit me." Susan hit her again, harder this time. "Your mother is dead. I am all you have now, and if you don't like it, you can leave." But Peace had nowhere to go. She was only 14 years old. She had no other family. All her parents' friends had stopped coming to visit after Susan took over the house. From that day on, Susan hit Peace whenever she complained about anything. If Peace said she was tired, Susan hit her. If Peace said she was hungry, Susan hit her. If Peace cried, Susan hit her. "Stop crying," Susan would shout. "Crying will not bring your parents back. Crying will not make your life better. Only work will make your life better." But the work never made Peace's life better. It only made her more tired and more sad. Susan ate good food every day. She cooked chicken and rice and vegetables for herself. She bought fruits and sweets. She drank cold drinks and ate ice cream. But Peace only got the leftovers. Whatever Susan did not finish, that was what Peace could eat. Sometimes there were no leftovers, and Peace had to go to bed hungry. "Food costs money," Susan would say. "If you want to eat, you have to work harder." But no matter how hard Peace worked, she never got more food. She only got thinner and weaker. Peace was only allowed to eat twice a day, once in the morning and once at night, and only if there were leftovers. Sometimes Susan would throw away the leftover food instead of giving it to Peace. "Oops," Susan would say with a mean smile. "I forgot you had not eaten yet." Peace would look at the good food in the trash and feel her stomach hurting from hunger, but she could not say anything. If she complained, Susan would hit her. At night, Peace had to work until very late. Even after Susan went to bed, Peace had to finish washing dishes and cleaning the kitchen. Sometimes she did not go to sleep until midnight, but she still had to wake up early the next morning to start working again. Peace became very thin. Her clothes hung loose on her small body. Her eyes had dark circles under them from not sleeping enough. Her hands were rough and cut from all the hard work. Sometimes Peace would look at old pictures of herself with her parents. In those pictures, she was smiling and looked healthy and happy. She had nice clothes and her hair was pretty. She looked like a different person. "Look at you now," Susan would say when she saw Peace looking at the pictures. "You are ugly and dirty. Your parents would be ashamed of you." But Peace knew this was not true. Her parents had loved her no matter what. They had always told her she was beautiful and smart and special. Susan sold all of Peace's nice clothes. She said they were too expensive to keep. She gave Peace old, torn clothes to wear instead. Most of them were too big or too small. None of them fit properly. Susan also sold all of Peace's toys and books. "You are too old for toys," she said, "and books are useless." The only thing Peace managed to keep was her Bible. She hid it under her mattress so Susan would not find it. When Susan was not looking, Peace would read her Bible and pray. It was the only thing that made her feel better. "God," Peace would pray, "please help me. I am so tired and sad. I miss my parents so much. Please make Susan be kind to me." But Susan never became kind. She only became meaner. One day, Peace found a small flower growing in the garden outside. It was yellow and pretty. It made her smile for the first time in weeks. She picked it and put it in a glass of water in her small room. When Susan saw the flower, she became very angry. "What is this?" she shouted. "It is just a flower," Peace said quietly. "I found it in the garden outside." "You have no time for flowers," Susan yelled. "You have work to do." She grabbed the flower and threw it in the trash. Then she hit Peace on the head. "Don't waste time on stupid things." Peace felt tears coming to her eyes. Even a small flower was not allowed to make her happy. Susan also made sure that Peace had no friends. When children from the neighborhood came to play, Susan would send them away. "Peace is too busy to play," she would say. "She has important works to do." Peace watched from the window as other children played and laughed outside. She wished she could join them. She wished she could be a normal child again. But Susan made sure Peace was always alone and always working. Sometimes Peace would remember how different things were when her parents were alive. Her mother would brush her hair gently and tell her stories. Her father would play games with her and make her laugh. They would eat meals together and talk about their day. Now, Peace ate alone in the kitchen while Susan ate in the dining room. Susan never talked to Peace unless she was giving her orders or yelling at her. "You are so lucky I take care of you," Susan would say. "If not for me, you would be living on the street like a beggar." But Peace did not feel lucky. She felt like a prisoner in her own house. The house that used to be full of love and laughter was now full of sadness and fear. Peace was afraid to make any noise. She was afraid to ask for anything. She was afraid to be happy. The only time Peace felt a little bit of hope was when she went to church on Sundays. Even though Susan made her wear ugly clothes and old shoes, Peace loved going to church. She loved singing the songs and hearing about God's love. Maybe God will help me, Peace would think. Maybe things will get better. But when she came home from church, everything was the same. Susan was still mean. The work was still hard. The food was still not enough. Peace began to think that maybe this was how her life would always be. Maybe she would never be happy again. Maybe she would always be Susan's servant, working hard and getting nothing in return. She was only 14 years old, but she felt like an old woman. She felt tired in her bones. She felt sad in her heart. She felt hopeless in her soul. But deep inside, in a small corner of her heart, Peace still had a tiny bit of hope. She still believed that maybe somehow things could change. She still believed that maybe someone would help her. She did not know that this Sunday, when she walked to church in those big, ugly shoes, everything would finally start to change. She did not know that Pastor Peter would see what Susan was doing to her. She did not know that help was coming. All she knew was that she had to keep going, one day at a time, hoping that someday things would be different. As Peace lay on her thin mattress last night, she held her torn Bible close to her chest and whispered a prayer. "God, if you can hear me, please help me. I cannot take much more of this. Please send someone to help me." She did not know that God had already heard her prayer. She did not know that tomorrow her life would begin to change forever. Pastor Peter stood in front of the church, looking at Peace with her one big ugly shoe and her torn Bible. His heart was breaking for this little girl. He had been a pastor for 20 years, and he had seen many children who needed help. But something about Peace made him feel very sad and very angry at the same time. "Peace," he said gently, "I want you to stay right here with me. You are safe now." Peace looked at him with her big, sad eyes. She wanted to believe him, but she was scared. Susan was watching from her seat, and her face was getting redder and angrier. "Pastor Peter," Susan said, standing up quickly, "I think there has been a misunderstanding. Peace is just going through a difficult time. You know how children can be dramatic." But Pastor Peter was not listening to Susan. He was looking at Peace's arms and legs. He could see small bruises and cuts. He could see how thin she was. He could see the fear in her eyes. "Mrs. Johnson," Pastor Peter called to a kind woman sitting in the third row, "please bring me the first aid kit from my office." Mrs. Johnson got up quickly and went to get the kit. She was a nurse, and she had also noticed that something was wrong with Peace. "Peace," Pastor Peter said softly, "can you show me your arms?" Peace looked back at Susan. Susan was shaking her head and making angry faces at her. Peace was scared to disobey Susan. "It's okay," Pastor Peter said. "Susan cannot hurt you here. Show me your arms." Peace slowly rolled up the sleeves of her torn dress. Everyone in the church could see the bruises on her thin arms. Some were old and yellow. Some were new and purple. There were many of them. The people in the church began to whisper. "Oh my God," someone said. "Look at those bruises." "That poor child," said another person. Mrs. Johnson came back with the first aid kit. She looked at Peace's arms, and her face became very sad. "Pastor Peter," she whispered, "this child has been hurt many times." Susan jumped up from her seat. "Those bruises are from playing," she said loudly. "Peace is very clumsy. She falls down all the time." But Pastor Peter had heard enough lies. "Mrs. Susan," he said in a firm voice, "please sit down. We will talk to you later." "You cannot tell me what to do," Susan shouted. "I am her guardian. She belongs to me." "She belongs to God," Pastor Peter said strongly. "And God does not want children to be hurt." An old woman named Mrs. Antonia stood up slowly from her seat. She was 70 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes. She had been watching everything. and her heart was full of love for peace. "Pastor Peter," Mrs. Antonia said, "I would like to help this child." Pastor Peter looked at Mrs. Antonia. He knew she was a good woman. She had raised 5 children of her own, and they had all grown up to be good people. She lived alone now in a big house, and she had always wanted to help children who needed care. "Mrs. Antonia," Pastor Peter said, "that is very kind of you, but this is a big responsibility." "I know," Mrs. Antonia said, walking slowly to the front of the church. "But look at this poor child. She needs someone to love her and take care of her properly." Mrs. Antonia reached Peace and knelt down beside her. "Hello, my dear," she said softly. "My name is Mrs. Antonia. Would you like to come home with me?" Peace looked at Mrs. Antonia's kind face. She had never seen such gentle eyes before. For the first time in 2 years, someone was looking at her with love instead of anger. I don't know," Peace whispered. "You don't have to decide right now," Mrs. Antonia said. "But I have a nice warm house with a soft bed. I have good food and clean clothes, and I have a lot of love to give." Peace felt tears coming to her eyes. She had forgotten what it felt like to have someone speak kindly to her. "No!" Susan shouted from her seat. "You cannot take her. She is mine. I am her legal guardian." Pastor Peter looked at Susan with stern eyes. "Mrs. Susan, if you are her legal guardian, then you have failed in your duty. Look at this child. Does she look like she is being cared for properly?" Susan's face became red with anger. "She is fed, and she has a place to sleep. What more does she need?" "Love," said Mrs. Antonia firmly. "She needs love and kindness. She needs someone to treat her like a human being, not like a servant." "She is not a servant," Susan lied. "She helps with chores because I am teaching her to be responsible." A man named David stood up from his seat. He lived near Susan's house, and he had seen things that made him worried. "Pastor Peter," he said, "I live near this woman's house. I have seen this child working outside from morning to night. I have heard shouting and crying. I have wanted to help, but I did not know how." Other people in the church began to speak up. "I have seen her walking to the tap outside many times a day," said Mrs. Jennifer. "She always looks so tired and sad." "I have seen her at the market buying food with very little money," said Mr. Jason. "She always looks hungry." "I have seen her washing clothes outside in the cold rain," said Mrs. Patricia. "No child should have to work so hard." Susan looked around the church. Everyone was looking at her with angry faces. She realized that people had been watching her and seeing how she treated Peace. "You don't understand," Susan said desperately. "Peace is a difficult child. She is lazy and ungrateful. I have to be strict with her." "Strict?" Pastor Peter said, his voice getting louder. "You call hitting a child being strict? You call making her wear shoes that don't fit being strict? You call making her work like a slave being strict?" "She is lying," Susan shouted, pointing at Peace. "She is making up stories to get attention." Pastor Peter looked at Peace. "Peace," he said gently, "tell us the truth. Does Susan hit you?" Peace looked at Susan, then at Pastor Peter, then at all the people in the church. She was scared, but she was also tired of being afraid. "Yes," she whispered. "Does she give you enough food to eat?" "No," Peace said, a little louder. "Does she make you do all the work in the house?" "Yes," Peace said, and now tears were falling down her face. "And does she say mean things to you? Or about your parents?" "Yes," Peace said, and now she was crying hard. "She says they were stupid. She says they deserved to die, but they were good people. They loved me." The whole church was very quiet. Everyone could hear Peace crying and telling the truth about her life. Mrs. Antonia put her arms around Peace and held her close. "It's okay, my dear," she said softly. "You are safe now. No one will hurt you anymore." Susan was getting very angry. She knew she was losing control of the situation. "You cannot do this," she shouted. "She is my responsibility. The law says I am her guardian." "The law also says that guardians must take care of children properly," Pastor Peter said, "and you have not done that." A young man named Timothy stood up. He was a lawyer who attended the church. "Pastor Peter," he said, "I can help with the legal matters. If this child has been abused, we can get help from the authorities." Susan's face became pale. She knew that if the authorities got involved, she would be in serious trouble. She had been using Peace's inheritance money for herself. She had been treating Peace like a slave. She had been hurting her. "Wait," Susan said, trying to sound sweet again. "Maybe we can work something out. I admit I have been a little strict with Peace, but I can change. I can be better." "It's too late for that," Pastor Peter said. "This child has suffered enough." Mrs. Antonia was still holding Peace close. "Peace," she said, "would you like to come home with me today? You can have a hot bath and a good meal. You can sleep in a real bed with soft pillows." Peace looked up at Mrs. Antonia through her tears.
"Really?"
she whispered. "Really," Mrs. Antonia said with a smile. "And you can go back to school. You can make friends. You can be a normal child again." Peace had not heard such beautiful words in 2 years. She had forgotten that life could be good. She had forgotten that there were kind people in the world. "Yes," Peace said softly. "I would like that very much." Pastor Peter looked out at the church full of people. "My brothers, my sisters, my friends," he said, "this child needs our help. She needs clothes and food and school supplies. She needs medical care for her injuries. She needs love and support." People in the church began to reach for their wallets and purses. They wanted to help Peace. They had seen her suffering, and they wanted to make it better. "I will give money for her clothes," said Mr. David. "I will pay for her school fees," said Mrs. Jennifer. "I will buy her food," said Mr. Jason. "I will take her to the doctor," said Mrs. Johnson, the nurse. Soon everyone in the church was offering to help. They were giving money and promising to provide things that Peace needed. Peace had never seen such kindness before. Susan watched all of this with growing anger. She realized that she was losing Peace, and with Peace, she was losing all the money and free work that Peace provided. "This is not fair," Susan screamed. "I have taken care of her for 2 years. I deserve something for all my hard work." "Hard work?" Pastor Peter said, his voice full of anger. "You have done no work. You have made this child do all the work while you lived in luxury." "That's not true," Susan lied. "Then explain this," said Mr. David. "I have seen Peace working in your yard while you sit in the shade drinking cold drinks. I have seen her carrying heavy buckets of water while you rest in the house. And I have seen her walking to church while you drive your car," said Mrs. Patricia. Susan realized that too many people had seen the truth. She could not lie anymore. Her face became full of hate. "Fine," she shouted. "Take her. I don't want her anyway. She is just like her stupid parents, weak and useless." Peace felt a flash of anger. "Don't say that about my parents," she said, louder than she had ever spoken to Susan before. "I'll say whatever I want," Susan screamed. "They were fools who died like fools, and they left me stuck with a worthless child." This was too much for Pastor Peter. "That's enough," he shouted. "Get out of this church. You are not welcome here." Susan looked around the church. Everyone was staring at her with disgust and anger. She realized that she had shown her true nature, and now everyone knew what kind of person she really was. "You will regret this," Susan said with hate in her voice. "All of you will regret this." She walked quickly out of the church, her high heels clicking loudly on the floor. Everyone watched her go, and they were glad to see her leave. Peace felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in 2 years, Susan could not hurt her anymore. Mrs. Antonia hugged Peace tighter. "Don't worry about her," she said. "She cannot hurt you anymore. You are safe now." Pastor Peter looked at Peace with a smile. "Peace," he said. "God has heard your prayers. He has sent people to help you." Peace looked around the church at all the kind faces. These people, who had been strangers just an hour ago, were now offering to help her rebuild her life. "Thank you," Peace whispered. "Thank you all so much." Mrs. Antonia stood up and took Peace's hand. "Come on, dear," she said. "Let's go home. Let's start your new life." As they walked toward the door of the church, Peace turned back to look at Pastor Peter. "Pastor Peter," she said, "thank you for saving me." Pastor Peter smiled. "I didn't save you, child. God saved you." He just used me to help." Peace smiled back. It was the first real smile she had smiled in 2 years. As they left the church, Peace felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. She knew that her life was about to change. She knew that she would never have to be afraid of Susan again. She was finally free. Mrs. Antonia's house was warm and beautiful. It smelled like flowers and fresh bread. Peace stood in the doorway, looking around with wonder. She had forgotten that houses could feel peaceful and loving. "Welcome home, dear," Mrs. Antonia said with a gentle smile. "This is your home now." Peace felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were happy tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Mrs. Antonia showed Peace to a bedroom upstairs. It had a real bed with soft pillows and clean blankets. There was a window with pretty curtains. There was a desk for studying and a closet for clothes. "This is your room," Mrs. Antonia said. "You can decorate it however you like." Peace sat on the bed. It was so soft and comfortable. She had not slept in a real bed for 2 years. "It's beautiful," she said. "First, let's get you cleaned up," Mrs. Antonia said. "Then we can have a good meal, and you can tell me about your life before all this sadness began." Mrs. Antonia helped Peace take a warm bath. She washed Peace's hair with sweet-smelling shampoo. She gave her clean clothes that fit properly. When Peace looked in the mirror, she could hardly believe what she saw. She looked like a normal, healthy child again. They sat down to eat together. Mrs. Antonia had made chicken soup, fresh bread, and vegetables. Peace ate slowly, savoring every bite. She had not tasted food this good in 2 years. "Now," Mrs. Antonia said kindly, "tell me about your life before Susan came. Tell me about your parents." Peace's face lit up for the first time in a long time. "My parents were wonderful," she said. "My father's name was Robert, and my mother's name was Mary. They loved me so much." "What was your father like?" Mrs. Antonia asked. "He was a very successful businessman," Peace said proudly. "He owned 3 big companies. He had many people working for him. He was very rich, but he was also very kind. He always helped poor people in our town." Peace's eyes sparkled as she remembered. "Every morning, my father would wake me up by singing to me. He would carry me downstairs to breakfast, and we would eat together as a family. He would ask me about my dreams from the night before." "And your mother?" "Oh, my mother was like an angel," Peace said with a beautiful smile. "She was so gentle and loving. She would brush my hair every night and tell me bedtime stories. She would help me with my homework and read books with me." Mrs. Antonia listened carefully, her heart breaking for this child who had lost so much. "We lived in a beautiful big house," Peace continued. "It had a garden with flowers and trees. I had my own room with toys and books. I had pretty clothes and shoes. I went to a good school where I had many friends." "You were very loved," Mrs. Antonia said softly. "Yes," Peace said, and tears began to fall again. "We were so happy. Every Sunday, we would go to church together. Then we would go to the park or visit my grandparents. We would have picnics and play games." "What happened to your grandparents?" Mrs. Antonia asked. "They died when I was very young," Peace said sadly. "So when my parents died, I had no other family. That's why Susan became my guardian." "Tell me about the day your parents died," Mrs. Antonia said gently. Peace took a deep breath. This was the hardest part of her story. "It was 2 years ago. There was a big business party in the next town. My father was going to receive an award for his company. My parents were so excited." "Were you supposed to go with them?" "Yes," Peace said, crying harder now. "But that morning, I woke up with a fever. I felt very sick. My mother wanted to stay home with me, but I told her to go. I said I would be fine with our maid Jenny, who was going to take care of me." Mrs. Antonia held Peace's hand as she continued. "They left in the evening. My father was wearing his best suit, and my mother looked so beautiful in her blue dress. They kissed me goodbye and said they would bring me a present from the party." Peace had to stop talking because she was crying so hard. Mrs. Antonia waited patiently. "They never came home?" Peace whispered. "That night, the police came to our house. They told Jenny that there had been a car accident. A drunk driver had hit my parents' car. They died instantly." "Oh, my dear child," Mrs. Antonia said, pulling Peace into a hug. "I'm so sorry. If I had not been sick," Peace sobbed, "I would have been in the car with them. I would have died, too." "No," Mrs. Antonia said firmly. "God saved you for a reason. He had a plan for your life." Peace cried in Mrs. Antonia's arms for a long time. It felt good to finally tell someone the truth about her parents and how much she missed them. "What happened after they died?" Mrs. Antonia asked. "Susan came to the house the next day," Peace said. "She said she was my father's cousin and that she would take care of me. She had papers that said she was my legal guardian." "Did you know her before that?" "No," Peace said. "I had never seen her before. My parents had never mentioned her, but she had all the right papers, so everyone believed her." "What was she like at first?" "At first, she was nice to me," Peace said. "She hugged me and said she was sorry about my parents. She said she would take good care of me. But as soon as all the other people left, she changed completely." Peace's voice became sad and angry. "The very first night, she made me sleep in the small room behind the kitchen. She said the master bedroom was too good for a child. She took my parents' bedroom for herself. What about all your parents' money and property?" "Susan took everything," Peace said bitterly. "She said she was my guardian, so she had the right to control all my parents' money. She said she would use it to take care of me. But she didn't use it for you?" "No," Peace said. "She used it for herself. She bought new clothes and jewelry. She bought expensive furniture. She went on trips to other countries. She never bought anything for me." Mrs. Antonia felt anger growing in her heart. "What about your father's businesses?" "Susan tried to run them, but she didn't know how," Peace said. "She fired all the good employees and hired her friends instead. She made bad decisions and lost money. Within 6 months, all 3 companies were bankrupt." "And your house?" "Susan sold it," Peace said sadly. "She said it was too expensive to keep. She sold all the furniture and my parents' things. She sold my toys and books. She sold my mother's jewelry and my father's watches." "Where did you live after she sold the house?" "She bought a smaller house with some of the money," Peace said. "But it wasn't a home. It was just a place where she kept me like a servant." "Did anyone try to help you?" "My parents' friends came to visit sometimes at first," Peace said. "But Susan told them I was adjusting to my new life and needed space. She made excuses every time they wanted to see me. Eventually, they stopped coming." "What about school?" "Susan took me out of my good school after just 1 month," Peace said. "She said it was too expensive. She said I didn't need education because I was going to be a housewife anyway." Mrs. Antonia shook her head in disgust. "So she stole your education too?" "Yes," Peace said. "I loved school so much. I was a good student. I had friends there. But Susan took all of that away from me." "How much money did your parents leave you?" "I don't know exactly," Peace said. "But it was a lot. My father was very wealthy. He owned 3 companies, 2 houses, and many cars. My mother had expensive jewelry and art. Susan sold everything and spent all the money on herself." "So you should have been a very rich child," Mrs. Antonia said. "Yes," Peace said. "But Susan made me live like a poor orphan. She made me work like a slave while she lived like a queen with my parents' money." Mrs. Antonia felt tears in her own eyes. This child had been robbed of everything: her parents, her home, her education, her inheritance, and her childhood. "But that's all in the past now," Mrs. Antonia said firmly. "We're going to make sure you get justice." The next day, Pastor Peter came to visit with Timothy, the lawyer from the church. They sat down with Peace and Mrs. Antonia to discuss what could be done. "Peace," Timothy said. "What Susan did to you was very wrong. It was illegal. We can help you get justice." "What do you mean?" Peace asked. "We can take her to court," Timothy explained. "We can prove that she abused you and stole your inheritance. We can make her pay for what she did." "But I have no proof," Peace said sadly. "She sold everything." "We have witnesses," Pastor Peter said. "Many people in the church saw how she treated you. Your neighbors saw you working like a slave. We have evidence of the abuse. And I can help investigate what happened to your parents' money," Timothy added. "There will be records of the sales and bank transactions. We can trace where the money went." Over the next few weeks, Timothy worked hard to build a case against Susan. He found records showing that she had sold Peace's parents' house for $500. She had sold the furniture and jewelry for another $200. She had liquidated the businesses for $300. In total, she had gotten over $1 million from Peace's inheritance. Timothy also found that Susan was not really Peace's father's cousin. She had forged the guardianship papers. She had no legal right to take care of Peace or control her money. "This is fraud," Timothy told Peace and Mrs. Antonia. "Susan committed serious crimes. She will go to jail for this." Meanwhile, Peace was starting her new life. Mrs. Antonia enrolled her in a good school. Peace was nervous on her first day because she had been away from school for 2 years. "Don't worry," Mrs. Antonia said, hugging her. "You're very smart. You'll catch up quickly." Peace's teacher, Miss Esther, was very kind. She helped Peace with the lessons she had missed. Peace worked hard and studied every night. She was determined to get her education back. The other children at school were curious about Peace at first, but she was so kind and friendly that she quickly made friends. For the first time in 2 years, Peace felt like a normal child again. "I'm so happy," Peace told Mrs. Antonia one evening. "I had forgotten what it felt like to have friends and to learn new things." "You deserve to be happy," Mrs. Antonia said, hugging her. "You've suffered enough." The church continued to support Peace. They bought her school supplies, clothes, and books. They treated her like their own daughter. Peace felt loved and cared for by so many people. 3 months later, the court case began. Susan was arrested and charged with fraud, child abuse, and theft. She tried to deny everything, but there was too much evidence against her. Peace had to testify in court about what Susan had done to her. It was scary, but Timothy and Pastor Peter were there to support her. "Tell the judge what Susan did to you," Timothy said gently. Peace told the court about the beatings, the hunger, the hard work, and the cruel words. She told them about how Susan had stolen her inheritance and spent it on herself. The judge listened carefully. When Peace finished, he looked at Susan with disgust. "Mrs. Susan," the judge said, "you have committed terrible crimes against this child. You stole her money, abused her body, and damaged her spirit. You will pay for what you have done." Susan was sentenced to 10 years in prison. She was also ordered to pay back all the money she had stolen from Peace, plus interest and damages. "Justice has been served," Timothy told Peace after the trial. "Susan will never be able to hurt you or any other child again." Peace felt a huge weight lift from her shoulders. She was finally free from Susan forever. Mrs. Antonia officially adopted Peace as her daughter. It was a beautiful ceremony at the church, with Pastor Peter performing the adoption blessing. "I now pronounce you mother and daughter," Pastor Peter said. "May God bless your new family." Peace hugged Mrs. Antonia tightly. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered. "Thank you for coming into my life," Mrs. Antonia whispered back. "You have made me so happy." With the money recovered from Susan, Peace was able to go to the best schools. She studied hard and got excellent grades. She was particularly good at business, just like her father had been. Years later, Peace graduated from university with honors. She started her own business to help children who had been abused or neglected. She wanted to make sure that no other child would suffer the way she had suffered. "I want to help children who have no one to protect them," Peace told Mrs. Antonia. "I want to be the voice for those who cannot speak for themselves." Mrs. Antonia was so proud of her daughter. "Your parents would be so proud of you," she said. "You have turned your pain into purpose." Peace also worked with Pastor Peter to start a program at the church to help children in need. They provided food, clothing, and educational support to families who were struggling. "God saved me for a reason," Peace told the church congregation one Sunday. "He saved me so I could help save others." Susan spent her 10 years in prison. When she was released, she was a broken and bitter old woman. She had lost everything: her beauty, her health, and her freedom. She lived alone in a small apartment with no friends and no family. Sometimes she would see Peace's picture in the newspaper, showing her success in business and her work helping children. Susan would feel jealous and angry, but there was nothing she could do. She had lost the right to be part of Peace's life forever. Peace, meanwhile, lived a wonderful life. She married a kind man named Michael, who loved her and treated her like a queen. They had 3 beautiful children together, 2 daughters and a son. Peace named her first daughter Mary, after her mother. She named her son Robert, after her father. Her second daughter was named Antonia, after the woman who had saved her and raised her with love. "I want my children to know about love and kindness," Peace told her husband. "I want them to know that even when bad things happen, good people will always be there to help." Mrs. Antonia lived to be 90 years old. She was surrounded by love in her final days, with Peace and her grandchildren caring for her. "Thank you," Mrs. Antonia whispered to Peace on her deathbed. "Thank you for letting me be your mother. You've been the greatest joy of my life." "Thank you for saving me," Peace whispered back, holding her hand. "Thank you for showing me what love looks like." When Mrs. Antonia died, the whole town came to her funeral. Everyone knew how she had rescued Peace and given her a new life. Peace spoke at the funeral, telling everyone about the woman who had been her savior. "She didn't just save my life," Peace said through her tears. "She taught me how to live. She taught me how to love. She taught me how to forgive. She taught me how to turn pain into purpose." Many years later, Peace was a grandmother herself. She would tell her grandchildren the story of how she had been saved by the kindness of strangers who became her family. The most important lesson, Peace would tell them, is that no matter how dark your life becomes, there are always people who will help you. God puts angels in our path when we need them most. Peace never forgot the big, ugly shoes that had started it all. She kept them in her closet as a reminder of how far she had come. Sometimes she would look at them and remember that Sunday when Pastor Peter had called her to the front of the church and changed her life forever. "Those shoes were ugly," she would tell her grandchildren, "but they led me to the most beautiful life I could have imagined." And Peace lived happily ever after, surrounded by love, success, and the knowledge that she had turned her suffering into a force for good in the world. Dear viewers, the little girl who had once walked to church in shame was now a woman who walked through life with pride, knowing that she had overcome the darkness and found the light. Susan's cruelty had been defeated by the power of love, kindness, and community. And Peace's story became a testimony to the truth that no matter how bad things seem, there is always hope for a better tomorrow. Where are you watching us from? Share your country's flag in the comments. Now it's your turn. Share your thoughts about Peace's story. What resonated with you the most? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another powerful, soul-lifting stories from us. And don't forget, at Virtuous Stories, we love you.